Latino Leadership Lunch Network Series. This will be our first event for 2016. My name is González. I am the chair for the Latino Leadership Network.
Welcome everyone. My name is Denise Mino and I'm here to introduce John Wiesman, Secretary of Health, who is also my boss. Thank you for being here, Secretary Wiesman.
Now something that has been put in various foods as supplements, into breads and into cereals, so that people can help get that just in their diet normally. And that is not something that's happening with fortified masa. And there's a initiative, the FDA is looking at whether or not that should be happening. We are trying to push them to resolution on that. They recently just did a 90-day extension on their decision-making around that, and we are, along with other members of Congress, really pushing them to, number one, do it. The March of Dimes has asked for this to happen. But again, equity issues here, right? We're not necessarily thinking about the entire food system or foods that people eat in our country. And so that awareness, again, I think, of how policy impacts health is incredibly important. Internal to the department, so there are lots of equity issues, obviously, that we could talk about, and I know that you guys are interested in. Internal to the department, as Denise said, I feel like one of the things I really needed to do as a leader is come in and say, as a culture, we need to start, actually, with our organization. And we've done that in a couple of ways. Denise, I think, actually used the words, bring your whole self to work. And that's one of the things that I did in my first videos that played to staff in the first week and a half that I was here, is that I wanted staff to bring their entire selves to work. Well, what does John mean by like bringing your entire self to work? It's about bringing together our culture to work, our history, the kinds of organizations that we're involved in a daily basis, in a way that I think enriches our ability to do health work. And certainly as a gay man, that was one of those things for me that I wanted to be able to bring to the department in terms of a community that's often, discriminated against, that does have particular health issues, whether it's incredibly large numbers of folks in my community that smoke, so the disproportionate there. To be able to bring that understanding to our program, we should be working on. We're not trying to be DSHS, but what is a public health role here? And we had a team of people, young leaders in our organization, intentionally, who are in a leadership development program, take this issue on. And Denise was talking about evidence that we're sort of living our values in the organization. This group, all women, amazing women, did their research, did all this stuff that any good project would do. But what really put this over the top for me, when they presented to the agency's leadership team what they thought we should be doing strategically on this issue, is talked about their personal family experience with mental illness. And it was that bringing their self to the work that added meaning and actually some urgency to the issue that was at hand. That is what I'm hoping that we do, by all of us, in whatever walks of life we have, that we bring that to the organization. And my expectation is that we create an environment where that's safe to do and respectful. So that's something that we're trying to work on. Remind me, I'm supposed to wrap up in how many minutes? What do I have left? 1 minute? 1 minute, all right, okay, 1 minute. We have also added to, we're in legislative session, we do bill analysis, right? Everybody, they all review them. We've added a section on health equity. What are the equity issues perhaps that can be addressed by this bill or that would be worsened by this legislation? So we're taking a look at that. We have developed essentially the equivalent of TED Talks called HEAD Talks, Health Equity, and I think it's development, I'm not sure what it is. Diversity, Health Equity Diversity Talks, where we do bring to the department in brown bags people to specifically talk about diversity issues. and things like white privilege and what does that mean in our organization. And we have hired a community relations position, Paj, if you could just wave over here, a new position that says we need to better develop relationships with a much more diverse organizations than we have. So we've hired Paj to help us do that. Now I will end on, there's a lot of work left to do in the organization. We are looking now with our entire leadership team at the profile of our organization, of our employees, by disability, by race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, at all kind of levels of employment to see where we stand on that. And frankly, at the top of our organization, the executive team, we're struggling around the racial ethnic disparities, or not disparities, but diversity. And so we have to continue to redouble our efforts to make sure that we're doing that. Now, one way to do that, I think, is to grow our leaders internally who are already in the organization and support them. And so we have a succession planning work that we are moving in that direction. So, lots going on at the department. I'm thrilled that you guys are here and had an opportunity to briefly chat with you. And somewhere, there Sarah's holding up, we've got cards of mine that are, where did we put them?
They're right at the back table over there.
Back table there. So if you want to email me or contact me with thoughts about what we could be doing or how else we could be engaged, I'd love to hear from you. So thank you so much.
State Supreme Court in 2012. Prior to that, Justice González served as a trial judge for 10 years on the King County Superior Court, hearing criminal, civil, juvenile, and family law cases. He also served as an assistant United States attorney in the Western District of Washington, a domestic violence prosecutor for the city of Seattle, and a business law associate in a Seattle law firm. Justice González earned his Bachelor of Arts with honors in East Asian Studies from Pitzer College in Claremont, California. As a part of his undergraduate degree, he studied abroad at universities in Japan and China. He later received his law degree from UC Berkeley School of Law, where he was the technical editor of the La Raza Law Journal. Justice González is passionate about providing open access to the justice system for all. In addition to his many court duties, he mentors students as well as attorneys through a judicial diversity program and serves as a board member for the Washington Leadership Institute, a program that aims to develop bar and community leaders who reflect the diversity of our state. Please join me in welcoming Justice B. González.
Well, thank you, Denise. It's a pleasure to be here. My first order of business is to introduce a dear friend of mine. I want Justice Yu, if you don't mind standing up. Part of what we're doing together is becoming a network, becoming mentors for each other. And I want to recognize the role that Justice Yu has played in my career, pushing me forward, urging me to step forward. In fact, she is one of the first people who urged me to put my name in for Superior Court some 15 years ago when we first met and began those discussions. So thank you very much for all that work. It's a pleasure to have you on the Supreme Court with me as a colleague. And I'll note, as an aside, this is an election year for the Supreme Court. There'll be 3 members of the court who are up for election. I urge you to make your own decision about that, but of course, Mary Yu is excellent. Moving next, I have a PowerPoint presentation which I'll be presenting in a bit. But before, I want to read a quote from the speech by a prominent person in our history. I want you to think if you can figure out who said these words. Let me preface it by saying these are not my beliefs, but they were expressed. Quote, "I am not, nor ever have been, in favor of bringing about, in any way, the social and political equality of the white and black races." Who does that sound like? This was President Lincoln speaking. He went on to say that He was not in favor of making voters or jurors of Negroes, nor qualifying them to hold office, nor to intermarry, etc. I read this not to besmirch the reputation of somebody who has a national holiday, but to point out that each of us, no matter how forward-thinking we are human. We are each fallible. We are each the products of our own era. And just as he failed to see at that point in his life, as he was running at that point for an office before running for presidency, as he was unable to see, or perhaps even saw but used for political advantage, the divide between the races. Each one of us may be making errors now that time will reveal. And it's important that we examine ourselves and understand where we might be making those mistakes. And as we look back to what are referred to as our founding fathers, we give great weight and importance to what they've said, but we also recognize that from time to time they made mistakes. They made mistakes at the inception of this nation by saying all men are created equal and meaning that they left women out altogether. That was a mistake. Of course, the treatment of Native Americans is an embarrassment. It is shameful. That was a mistake. We didn't even contemplate Latinos at that point when the nation was founded. Of course, that was a mistake. They're the neighbors to the south. I say it again, not to be critical of these leaders, but to point out that we must look at ourselves right now and try to imagine in a generation or two from now how we're going to look. How are we going to look? Did we step forward and say we support the right of people to marry regardless of who they love? Or did we wait? Did we show courage and step up and speak on behalf of other groups? So let me see if I can take a little bit of my own advice in that regard here. Let me quote two more of our founding fathers. First, Ben Franklin, quote, "Any society that would give up a little liberty to gain a little security will deserve neither and lose both." James Madison, "If tyranny and oppression come to this land, it will be in the guise of fighting a foreign enemy." And when in the past have we made that mistake? During World War II, for example, we interned our Japanese fellow citizens of Japanese ancestry without any evidence to support that. After 9/11 and the excesses of the Patriot Act, we got a bit zealous about enforcing our security over our liberty. And I think it's a very dangerous thing. I think some of the anti-Arab and Muslim rhetoric that we hear fits into that same category. It's dangerous. We are one nation regardless of what God we believe in or no God, what we look like and who we love. And I think it's critical for us to remember those founding principles, even though our history is replete with examples of us failing to live up to that. It's also replete with examples of us striving to be the best that we can be, to keep that promise to each other. So thank you for letting me in on my soapbox. Briefly, I serve on the state Supreme Court. This is the building we work in. It's called the Temple of Justice. And since my mother is Jewish, she's very proud that I work in the temple. And before I joined the Supreme Court, there was one person of color, one Latino on the court before us. 10 years before I joined the court, Justice Charles D. Smith retired. He was Cuban and African American. Is that right, or Dominican? Cuban and African American. So I'm the second, and Justice Yu is the third person of color. She is, her father was Chinese and her mother was Mexican. So when we have in common, each one of us is Latino and something else. That's So we're elected statewide, and we serve staggered 6-year terms. The governor appoints for interim vacancies. That's how Justice Yu got on the court initially. That's how I got on the court. Initially, I was appointed by Gregoire, and Governor Inslee appointed. And won the unexpired remainder of her predecessor's term. That's why she's so quickly back up again, because there wasn't that much left. And it used to be, back when I ran, that these races were decided in the primary. They now go to the general election. And of course, my predecessor had a hard time letting go, as you can see. But I took Justice Alexander's position on the Supreme Court. And I've been encouraged to run, and one of the people who encouraged me was, marry you. And I had some good qualifications. I speak a few languages, went to a good law school, I was rated exceptionally well qualified, etc. So I thought that I was at least ready to serve on the Supreme Court if I had the chance. But I remember my experience from 2002 when I ran for Superior Court and I drew an opponent at the last hour of the last day who didn't campaign as much and didn't get the same number of endorsements, but had a name that apparently was more palatable in King County. That is not a Latino name. Now, back then when I talked about it, people said that wasn't a factor. I know that it was. I know that it was. So I was worried that this could happen again. So these are the dangers that we think about when we're stepping forward as people of color or people with names that sound to some people foreign. González, of course, is an American name. That we have to think about, which makes it more expensive and more risky to seek public office when you come from a minority background than otherwise. Other people take it for granted, but it's something important to think about. So I spoke to consultants before I decided to put my name in, and they said that in King County, because of my last name against a similarly situated candidate, I would be 3 to 5 points behind. And anybody who knows anything about elections knows that's a huge gap. And that I would be much farther behind outside of King County, much farther behind, and that I would be lucky to beat 35% in Spokane. Scary information when you're leaving a job and taking another job, to think about what might happen given those numbers. But they say that this is not going to change. We're going to continue electing judges in the state. We went ahead anyway. My wife was supportive. My boys, our boys and my wife and I went down to Olympia for the governor to announce my appointment. There was a nice ceremony where she spoke. We enjoyed the day together. The media immediately began asking me questions, and you can see from the face of my campaign manager, he was concerned. We had a nice ceremony where I was robed, and this was the court before I joined it. This was the court before I joined it. Now, diversity matters in substance, and it matters in appearance. This is the court now. Now, what's the big difference between the previous picture and this picture? There are now 2 people of color on the court. But we know the optics matter because this is a panel who was testifying in DC about women's health and women's reproductive rights. When you just look at that panel, for some of us, you automatically don't give them credence. You don't listen, even if they had something worthwhile to say. The fact that it's a group of men telling women how to treat their bodies immediately is a problem. And I think it's the same way on the court for justice, and probably in each of the agencies where you work. It's a question of both appearance and it's also substance. Because it's not enough just to get the crumbs that fall off the table. If we're sitting at the table, we have to have a voice and a statement. And it's not enough to make people feel comfortable by looking around the table and knowing that there's diversity there. You actually have to respect that additional point of view and include it and incorporate it in the work that you do. The appearance alone is not enough by any stretch. So I put this picture in because we had the governor's ball after he was elected, and they told me this is the 100th anniversary celebration of the building of the Temple of Justice, so you have 2 choices. You can wear a black tie, a tuxedo, or you can dress as people dressed 100 years ago at the Supreme Court. Well, I don't have a tuxedo, I've never had one, and I don't think they would have let me in the building 100 years ago, so I wore my mariachi jacket to the governor's ball.
All right.
So I work at the temple. I have a nice door with my name on it. We're on television in Washington for any insomniacs in the audience if you want to watch. Find us. But I had to immediately campaign for the position, like just as you was doing now, statewide. I had the endorsement of both gubernatorial candidates, unprecedented in a Supreme Court race. So I walked in parades with both Jay Inslee and Bob McCann. I met the smallest mariachi in the state. I had yard signs. Not everybody was as friendly. I was on Univision. I gave graduation speeches at colleges throughout the state. I got to go on the pitch at Sounders game and get the golden scarf, which impressed our boys more than anything else that I did. I met some prominent national leaders. I learned to take a selfie and shake hands at the same time. Met Justice Sotomayor, that's my wife. Yeah. And if there's any question about how I voted, this is a picture. And so the good news, we worked really hard and we won. I had 60% of the vote statewide. What made it a bittersweet victory is that this is the map of my victory. The yellow counties, there are 39 counties in the state of Washington. I won 10 and my opponent won 29. Now why is that troubling? Right? I won with 60%, that's a landslide. But my opponent I never met. He never left his home. No one endorsed him. He raised no money. When the media finally reached him on the phone, he said, I don't talk to you because you're not smart enough to ask good questions. At a previous forum, when he'd run for another office, he said women are known to scratch themselves to get men arrested for domestic violence. He was rated not qualified for Superior Court when he ran before, and in his county, Kitsap, they did a bar poll. They asked all the lawyers who would make a better justice, Danielson or González, and he lost 90-2, and I suspect he voted in that. So I don't say this to diminish him or to brag about myself, but to give you an idea that there really was a contrast between the two. All the newspapers endorsed me. In Spokane, the newspaper said about my race, Justice González does not have serious opposition. That's how they covered the race, and he endorsed me. He won in 29 counties, all eastern Washington, all southern Washington, and he had more than a 20-point lead in 18 counties. We beat me by more than 20% in 18 counties. In Chelan, for example, he got 60% of the vote, but of the 40,000 registered voters, only 12,838 actually voted. So if you look at the numbers, the percentage of registered voters you need to actually win is very small. By the way, he lost in Kitsap, where he's from, because they know him. And when I went to talk at a junior high after the election, and I just put up the map and I said that I had a much harder time in eastern Washington, why do you think that is? One seventh grader put up his hand and said, well, my cousin lives in Yakima. And in Yakima, the Mexicans are janitors or gardeners. And the voters probably thought, we don't want a janitor or a gardener to be on the Supreme Court. So out of the mouths of our children, we learn the problem that we face as a community. The stereotypes we confront and have to overcome, they are real, and we can't ignore them and pretend that they're not.
If I see a diverse candidate and I look at that court, that's the direction I vote, is in the diverse candidate.
Well, let me ask you to be more subtle about your approach. I would suggest that I'm named González and I'm qualified for the position. We heard from Phil González, another González qualified. Not all González are qualified. I think we have to admit that. And it's important that we cast informed votes. Because when we looked at the vote in Yakima, the Anglo precincts voted overwhelmingly for my opponent. The Latino precincts voted overwhelmingly for me. And what I take away from that is that in the Anglo precincts, they didn't do their homework and they voted based on name. In the Latino precincts, we all did our homework and chose the most qualified candidate. That's a joke. I think the problem exists in all of the communities, that we're voting sometimes with the jerk of a knee rather than informing ourselves. There's a really good webpage. It's called Voting for Judges, one word, votingforjudges.org. It won't tell you who to vote for, but it'll give you all of the credentials, endorsements, and pamphlet statement, all in one place where you can evaluate their qualifications and decide who you think, based on what they've done before and who supports them, who you think will make the better judge. And I urge you to take that approach. We want people to cast informed votes, not votes based on category.
We have a question right here.
Yeah. Thank you for the question, by the way.
Your Honor, what, in your perspective, can we do as young community leaders to advance not only this cause, but all of the justices' cause in favor of diversity, from your perspective?
I think we have plenty of smart people. What we lack in leadership sometimes is people with courage. Because it takes fortitude to stand up and say, I disagree, and here's why. And that's what I would urge you to do. There's a risk. You wouldn't be courageous if there wasn't a risk. But I urge you not to stand silently by. As the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, there comes a time when silence is betrayal. And so I think you really have to gird yourself and say, no, it's time for me to speak up. And not just for Latinos, especially when it's another group that's affected. I think it's important to speak up.
Thank you for sharing your story. My name is Jose Chavez. I'm looking at Latino leadership in Pierce County, trying to get a representation. Which my question is it's all about perspective. Just like that 7th grader said, hey, you're just a gardener or I feel, and I just want to know what your opinion is that in the media or in the images of our people, that's exactly what you see. That's what you see.
Every time you walk into the Supreme Court, you see 2 of us on the bench.
That's right. So, like I said, my question was, how can us young leaders be in front to show the difference?
I love going to schools. Students will tell you exactly what they're thinking, like that 7th grader. He told me exactly what his opinion was. And when you have that much transparency, truth, and honesty coming up, you can confront it and talk about it. You can refute it and have that discussion and educate the whole classroom. I hope each of you will take time to visit elementary, middle, high schools, talk to the kids. I am underwhelmed by the level of civics education and understanding in our communities and our schools. It's not taught as a subject, it is critical. An informed, educated electorate is the only way a democracy functions, and I'm worried. I'm very worried about that. So I would urge you to go talk to the kids, mentor the kids, spend time with the kids, and talk about race directly with them. They can handle it.
Right here. Question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your Honor, we welcome you, and I'm honored to be in an audience listening to your remarks, and I applaud you for taking on this particular subject. A number of years ago, I was the chairman, I was the president of the Sacramento Hispanic Chamber, and I was privileged to have Joe Cerna, the mayor of Sacramento at that time, on my board. He worked very hard to encourage young Latinos to run for political office as he had. One of the things that we always ran across was parents unwilling to let their children really move into that forum and really stretch out their wings to take on the challenges of an elected office. Can you comment a little bit more than what you already had with regard to how do we take on a group of people that want to hold down for right or wrong, want to hold down their offspring?
My impression is that Latino parents are very supportive of their offspring. I haven't found them, I have found some fear, but I haven't found them really wanting to hold people back. So I think knowledge and understanding is the key. And sometimes you have to wait until they're free from their parents. We're our own family here in this room. We can encourage, and I think there are candidates here who can serve that role, that leadership role. Many already are. But building that network and encouraging each other and supporting each other when we do it. Not just watching from afar. When someone puts their neck out, you got to be there to help them. Yeah. And I think we serve that role for each other. That's why this network is so important. It's so critical. Yes.
I have more so of a comment than a question, but I have to say that I do agree with knowledge, information is key, and support to our kids. With being a mother of myself, I have 3 kids. They range from 14 to 3. This is good information. This is new information. So in my opinion, I would say please don't stop sharing this information. I will now pass this on to my kids. And in order to change the next generations, is to go down to our youngest generations. How are you going to change that without passing this message on to the youngest generation that is listening today? I think that's key, and I want to just say that I agree, and thank you.
Sorry.
How you doing, Judge?
Well, I still have the dream catcher that you gave me.
Thank you. One question. Since your tenure on the Washington State Supreme Court, how do you feel you have changed the landscape regarding stereotypes, these stigmas, and especially amongst the justices themselves?
Interestingly, it was 6 then sitting Supreme Court justices who were among those who encouraged me to pursue the position in the first instance. So I had encouragement and support from the supermajority of the then sitting justices. One of the benefits of the leadership position is I get to speak to people. I get to speak to students. I have the ability to communicate just because of the position. So I very much enjoyed going around the state and talking, especially to students, and encouraging them. But I think every day, every time we give a tour, and Justice Yu just went to give a tour to students visiting the Temple of Justice, she'll let them sit in her chair and imagine themselves one day there. I think that makes a difference. I really do. And the portrait that I showed you earlier of Justice Smith, that wasn't at the Supreme Court. It didn't exist when I got there. And when we went down for the appointment, our then 7-year-old younger boy looked at all the portraits on the wall and said, how come they don't look like us? Changing that is critical. That's why I got Alfredo Rodriguez to paint that portrait, and it now hangs at the Supreme Court. So every student group who comes through sees a picture of Justice Smith. We have a role model in color on the wall now. Things like that make a huge difference. We have to see ourselves and imagine ourselves there. It's much easier to get there once we've been able to imagine it occurring.
Quick question here.
Yes.
First of all, it's an honor to have some people like you that, represent la raza, la gente, los Latinos that's, grown up in Texas. One of the reasons I stayed off the street, got into video, media, promotions is seeing people like you. So my question to you, are you willing to support events if an organization or a group can reach young Latinos, who could, like in numbers?
Am I willing to go?
Yeah, be a guest speaker, hypothetically, maybe a car show, a festival, because they need to see this.
I think he's promising pictures with beautiful cars.
Yeah, oh yeah.
You're tempting me. Motorcycles will get me even closer.
Oh yeah.
I enjoy meeting people and speaking. I mostly enjoy going to schools, but I'm willing to expand.
We can take that conversation offline.
So I grew up in Southern California. My dad's family was from Mexico. They came during the Mexican Revolution, so we're talking 100 years ago. My mother's family were also refugees, but from Eastern Europe, from the pogroms against the Jews there. So I grew up, I was the first on either side in my immediate family to go to college.
Wow.
I started working as a janitor. It was my first job at 14. I misrepresented my age and got a job cleaning the restrooms, driving one of those 3-wheel Cushmans. And it was the odors and what I encountered in public restrooms that made me want to go to school, because I didn't want to keep doing that the rest of my life. I've faced some issues. I faced some issues back then. I had the career counselor in high school telling me I should be a mechanic or a claims adjuster. That was as high as they aimed for me. And I had different ideas. But we have to use that negative energy to improve ourselves. To say, I'm going to prove that person wrong. Negative experiences, that's the best thing that they can be, is a motivation for you to say, no, that's not right. I believe in myself, I'm more than that. So developing in our kids an internal measure of worth, not waiting for the test, not waiting for the teacher, not waiting for the counselor, but knowing inside themselves what they want to be and what they want to achieve so that they can say, I believe in myself. That's critical for us to do. Great.
Question over here.
Hi, so I kind of have a comment, I guess. You stated that you would like to see more civics education in K-12, which is really important. And I work for the Secretary of State's office. I focus on outreach, and I'm the one that sent out the email. There's a position open right now that focuses on voter education and outreach for K through 12 and college civics. So if you know anyone, that would be great. There's going to be 2 of us working on this, so it is really tough having 2 people to do this type of work for the whole state. Yeah, so I just wanted to let you guys know if you know anyone. It closes on Wednesday.
Thank you for that announcement. There's been a new Latino judge appointed in Grant County, David Estudillo. If he wins in this election, I think he's going to have an opponent. If he wins, it will be the first time that a Latino surnamed judge has ever won a contested election. The difference for me, whatever we can do to keep our students in school with hope for their future, that's critical. Keeping them in school is the one thing I would focus on: education, education, education. I think we're out of time, so I'm going to close. I wanted to take a moment to introduce two law students who are externing with me, who came here to lunch today. Azar Alexander and Cesar Kalinowski. And one of my law clerks gave me a quote that she likes, and I'd like to, she's not here with us here today, but I'd like to read that quote to close my remarks. It's by Kimberly Crenshaw. It's not about supplication, it's about power. It's not about asking, it's about demanding. It's not about convincing those who are currently in power. It's about changing the very face of power itself. Thank you for your attention today.
Thank you, Justice González. You know, I want to just take the time to thank all our volunteers today for putting this event together. Would you please stand? I know we had some standing earlier, but would you please stand?
Anyone who has been helping with the Latino Leadership Network, please stand. We've been coming to meetings. Rachel, David, thank you for standing, David. Thank you.
And then I'd like to thank Dave Cortez, who videos our events, and we put them online. So you're able to go to the LLN website and be able to look at them, those video events. Thank you.